I didn't die because I was working at this job. I died because I was living the way that I live.
Lou Marchetti was a seasoned private equity investor who dropped dead in his 30s. Yep, he went into full-on cardiac arrest. Thankfully, he made a full recovery, and a few months later, he was wheeling and dealing and back in the boardroom. And then he got fired.
I was so heartbroken. It took me really until we'll get to this part, till I got fired from my job, to actually take a step back and be like, why did this happen?
That's Lou, a senior investment professional at the private equity behemoth Vista Equity Partners. Lou was a hard-charging executive who sacrificed his health to become a master of the universe. But getting fired forced him to take stock of his life. And in this episode, we discuss how a personal crisis led him to find purpose, the danger of achievement-based identity, and how hard it is to create space for reflection when you're going at 100 miles an hour. Let's jump in.
Lou, I want you to take us back. You're 41 years old, doing at your local CrossFit. You were a private equity deal maker. Walk us through that workout. Yeah, so that particular day was quite ominous, and it's a interesting place that I sit here and tell this from, because I did survive something that 90% of people don't survive, but I also don't remember it. So arguably the most important physical moment of my life, I don't have any recollection of. But I'll set it up, okay, if that's all right with you. Please. A little bit of the kind of how I got there, just to kind of explain how I was approaching life at the time. So this was May of 2019. I was 41 years old, as you mentioned, and I was arguably in the best shape of my life. I had just been done a workup, which our old job used to send us to do, the senior team, to make sure we were okay, so things like this wouldn't happen. And I passed with flying colors. I was 200 pounds. I'm about 6'6". My body fat was 9%, and my resting heart rate was 36, which is extraordinarily low if you're even in endurance land. And there were no blockage. They did all the scans, no plaque. So I thought I was just cruising in life. I thought I was unstoppable. I was invincible. And I had, the day before, it happened on a Thursday. On the Wednesday, I'd just flown in late at night from a JP Morgan conference up in Boston with my boss at the time was the co-founder and president of the firm I worked at. And the next day I would fly to Philadelphia for my 10-year business school reunion. And all of this in a manner that I needed to get in that day and get my workout in, because I was training to climb the highest peak in Europe, a mountaineering expedition on Mont Blanc. And so I was just running as hard as one possibly could. And that morning, so they tell me, I showed up at the gym, and it was my off day, technically, but I wasn't going to take an off day. And so I rushed in at 6:30 and jogged down. And I finished what was a pretty typical workout at the time, was 9 rounds, high intensity. And my trainer tells me that I took a knee and collapsed. My eyes rolled into the back of my head, and I fell over, and I started gasping for air like a fish out of water. And fortunately, there were 2 women in particular that day that were really angels. That's what I call them. And they were there in that gym that day. And one of them was about 5 feet from me, saw me go down, and just immediately went and grabbed the AED, ran over. It was chirping low battery, low battery, low battery, as she pressed it onto my chest, and it shocked my heart. Next thing, a woman walks out of the bathroom who happens to train all the lifeguards in Austin, Texas, where I was, in CPR, in life emergency medicine. And she sees what's going on, and she's a mama bear, has 6 children, and just looked at it, cleared everybody out but the other woman, and started doing chest compressions with enough force to break my ribs. And so between her doing chest compressions and pumping air through my lungs, and the other woman doing mouth to mouth, and with the shock of the AED and the compressions really keeping my blood flowing, they kept me alive until the EMTs got there. And when the EMTs arrived, they intubated me. They put the breathing tube down my throat and hooked me up to life support and rushed me off to the hospital, where they put me into a coma, medically induced coma, and hypothermia protocol, which is standard to see, protect
any sort of vital organs, because again, I think if you, as I studied this afterwards, the survival rate for out of hospital cardiac arrest, which is what I went into, is between 7 and 10%. And if you're lucky enough to survive, there's about a 10% chance that you will not have brain damage. So it's about a 1% chance that you live and that you don't have brain damage. So that's what I was up against at that time. So that's the day. We can go into more detail if it's helpful, but it was, it was a very startling day.
Wow. Well, those, I mean, I know you're a spiritual person, like those guardian angels, man. It's just like, God had a plan for you, right? And
it's something like that. Still trying to understand that part, but I was very lucky. And I get to see them every, we call it my rebirth day, every year. So we developed a pretty special relationship.
And at that time you were married, but no kid, or
not quite married. So if you want some more kind of fascinating and troubling context to it all. So this happened on a Thursday. I'd been dating my now wife for about 3 years. We had broken up 3 times, mainly because I couldn't figure out how to grow up and actually commit emotionally in a relationship. But longer story on that part. But we were almost finally at that point, and my wife had put in her notice on Tuesday that she would leave her job, which was really her dream job in the fashion world in New York, and move to Austin, Texas. So that's Tuesday. Thursday, she gets a call that her partner in life, who she just chosen to go uproot her life and move to really give it a shot after we'd broken up 3 times, is in a coma at the hospital.
Oh, man. And so that's Thursday. Do you recall the first when do you remember coming back to us?
Yeah, so it's a bit blurry. They drug you out pretty good, and partly just to keep you alive and make sure everything works in your body. But there were a few moments that I kind of recall with kind of a lot of family. My brother was in Austin at the time. He was the first there. And my mom, dad, Jessica, my now wife, flew down, and my siblings, other siblings, there's 4 of us, eventually came. But I remember moments in and out of that week of being in the hospital, because I was in intensive care for 4 or 5 days until they kind of stabilized. And there were these big thresholds that I had to get through. Like the first was, can they take me off life support when my heart beat? And so there were multiple moments of incredible anxiety followed by incredible relief. And the one story which I kind of like, there's something like, hey, is there something there? Was my sister was living in London at the time with her husband and 3 kiddos, and she was on FaceTime. They hadn't been able to get a flight in yet, and this was right when they had taken me, like probably 3 days after the incident, 2 or 3 days after incident, and they had taken me off life support, and they were, but I wasn't responding. I was beating, my heart was beating okay, but I wasn't conscious. And there was this moment where she and her husband, Brian, were yelling at the phone saying, "Lou, can you hear me? Can you hear me?" And they said that I gave a little bit of a shimmy and squeezed my wife's hand. She was telling me to squeeze her hand. I was holding my mom's, the other one. So I squeezed my hand, and of course the whole room, and I almost cried thinking about it, erupted, and it was tears like, oh my gosh, she's alive. And then at one point I made a pretty off-color joke about when they pulled the breathing tube out and I was coughing up stuff. My sister has a genetic disease, which is terminal, called cystic fibrosis, that really destroys your lungs. And I coughed up a bunch of stuff, and I said, "Wow, I think I got CF, Marge," to my sister. They were like, "Okay, this idiot's back.
He's back."
And so, he's back.
Hey, quick time out. If you're watching this video, you're probably someone who thinks deeply and intentionally about your career, about your life, and about your relationships. But sometimes you might find yourself in a place feeling stuck, unmotivated, or just rudderless? If that's you, we have a coaching program for people looking to make a bold pivot and rediscover their aliveness. Just check out radreads.co/coaching. Now back to the video.
So, but it was probably until I really left the hospital that I kind of got, fully coherent, because the drugs really mess with you quite a bit. And till you eat, it takes a little while to get your memory back. So many other little stories, which I could talk about, but.
Well then, so how much after that Thursday, how many days, weeks, months are you feeling normal again? Like life gets back to normal.
Yeah, it depends on how we define normal, I guess. Okay. So how quickly did I want to get back, and how quickly did I actually get back are probably two very different questions.
Walk us through those.
Yeah, I remember I got home about 8 days after this all happened. And so the last day, the doctors, they still don't know what happened to me. They ran all the tests. I've seen 3 other doctors across the country since then. But what they did is they said, listen, we don't know what happened to you. Your heart went haywire. You went into what's called ventricular tachycardia. And your big left ventricle pumps all the blood to the body, just went hard and stopped. It's kind of the explanation. So they said, we don't know. It's very odd, and the chances of this ever happening again are incredibly low. But they opened up my chest, said, we want to be safe. So they put it, so I have a pacemaker and a mini AED in my chest, which I carry around. So they gave me that. So like, you're going to be okay. Even if it does happen again, which it shouldn't ever happen again, especially if you're in your health and fitness. But I have that. So that was always there. So it's, in some ways I never went back to the way that I was physically, because I have this piece of equipment implanted and hooked up to my heart. Man. I am bionic, man. So I get to go around metal detectors. I guess that's probably the only benefit of it, other than maybe not having to not dying again at some point. And it did go off a false positive one time, and it was not very fun. It
Is this the one where I think I have a friend where it like got a Wi-Fi signal and it's just like monitoring. Yeah. And if something starts to go awry, it can like basically like call 911 in a nutshell.
It can do that. It'll also shock you. So it'll actually send 1,000 volts to your heart, which it did to me twice when I was awake and coherent, which was not very fun. And it essentially blacks you out. And then I was very nervous after that. And it gave me honestly a lot of triggering each time I worked out for about the next year. But I came back, and I remember I wanted to get back in the office. I was like, how quickly can I got to get back. Part of this was like, that's all I knew. Part of it was that I really needed to show people, at least I thought I did, that I was okay. And that I was actually, this was just a bump in the road for my invincibility. And so I remember my boss at the time, we spoke soon after that. My old firm was incredibly supportive of me and did a whole lot that day, and friends included who were there. But I remember he called me and he said, so you went to the other side. What'd you learn? And my response was, I kind of look at it now and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that, but I can. I said, I'm in the right place at the right time, doing what I love, and I don't need to change a thing. Just resolutely, this didn't even happen. I don't need to think about it. I don't need to change. I don't need to get any perspective. I just need to keep going. And honestly, that mountain that I talked about, the actual mountain, the physical mountain, Mont Blanc, I tried to climb it 5 weeks after I went into cardiac arrest. If you want to
5 weeks after that Thursday.
Yeah, 5 weeks after that Thursday. If you want to talk about the little bit of crazy that's inside of me. And I was just so convinced that this was my comeback story. And I was with 2 friends, and we had a guide, and on a nearby peak, and this is a big icy glacier. I think it's killed 8,000 people over the years since they've been tracking. It's a pretty serious climb in climbing world, but it's accessible. And we're up there on a sister mountain, and we get to this peak, and I'm like, oh man, like a sister peak, not the big one, but it's about 14,000 feet. The big one's about 16. And I'm like, I got this, because I was really scared inside, and I was kind of like,
you actually did it. It was not that you wanted to do it. You went and did it.
I went and did it. Yeah. No, I went. I flew to France. Yeah, I did. The doctor, which is so odd that I talked to my wife. My wife was sitting there like, what the hell is wrong with you? why are you telling this guy, like, you don't know this guy's going to go do it. Maybe he's going to go try to do it. And so I get there. And so we fly to France 5 weeks later and Chamonix, the base down. And we start in this climb next 2 month long. And we get to about 14,000 feet, this peak. And I'm like, I got the shit. Like, I am back, man. I am back. And we start to descend because you got to get down, you go regroup. And it's, you're in crampons, you're your ice axe, you're roped in. Like it's pretty hairy up there. And there was some loose rock as well as you're coming down. And a friend accidentally, who I was roped into, pulled a rock. It came off the face of the mountain and tumbled in the air and smashed this right hand. You could see my right finger is actually crooked. So we couldn't stop. It was too dangerous where we were. So we had to descend another 15 feet as my hand's bleeding and numb. And we get to this icy plateau, snowfield sorts. And the guide calls a helicopter and medical evac. And so 5 minutes later, I have a video of this, Khe, which I'll send you. If anybody wants to watch it, it's insane because I can't believe this actually happened. Buddy had a GoPro. The helicopter crests over the mountain, lands 5 feet from us, throwing up snow everywhere, points at me, brings me onto the helicopter, and then disappears over the mountain again.
So you got medevaced.
I got medevaced out. And then they took me to hospital, which took me to another hospital, which put me on the operating table. Incredible healthcare, by the way, in France.
Wow.
I think it cost me like $200 in the end to have my finger surgically repaired. And I was home to our Airbnb by 6 p.m. And it was, I still wanted to get back up there. Like I was just not going to be stopped. And I was the next day, I had to go get my cast fitted. I was like, I'm going to get this cast. And then I was messaging the guide, like, hey, can I get back up there? Can I get back up there? And no one had the heart to tell me you can't go until this French doctor. We went there and we had Google Translate, right? Can you drive? Can I ride? He's like, oui. It's like, can I climb the mountain? He's like, no, Montagna, no. And we're like, okay. But I was honestly,
someone had to put their foot down.
Someone had to do it, Khe. But I was so heartbroken. I just remember it being, oh man, I can't do it. So it took me really until we'll get to this part, till I got fired from my job, to actually take a step back and be like, what happened?
Wow.
Why did this happen? So that was,
man.
Yeah, little intensity. So I don't, by the way, I don't encourage either of those for anyone. So
that is the best podcast opener story. This is like the 87th episode. And I think you had told me that the Mont Blanc story, but I kind of had forgotten it. So let's do like a little fast forward of like what got you there. And so you're 41. I mean, clearly there's some things that are table stakes, or we see them as table stakes now. You're extremely driven. You're motivated. You probably have extremely high pain threshold, hiking, mountaineering, private equity, CrossFit. I'm sure that's only scratching the list of the total list of intense ways Lou likes to challenge himself. And but maybe just let's do like a little detour on like how'd you get into private equity? What did this, at that point, you're 20 years in the workforce. Tell us a bit about the background there.
Yeah. So I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, and there were no finance folks in my life. There were some, I shouldn't say it. There were no folks in investment banking / private equity. I went to North Carolina, Chapel Hill, to go to school. I thought I was going to be an attorney. That's what my dad is. And I just had always dreamed or read To Kill a Mockingbird and some John Grisham. And it's like, this is the thing. And I hated the law classes that I took when I went to Carolina. And I was playing football too at the time, which was a lot of fun. But I get there and so I said, wow, the best program they have in this school is the business school. And I love practical. So I took a few prereqs. And so I ended up deciding to go to the business school there. And if you go to any business school, one of the most logical places you end up afterwards is investment banking. And so I didn't know what it was. I was interviewing for jobs during coming out of, and I redshirted, so I played an extra year. So I was coming out in December. And I ended up finding my way to a bank that was in Nashville, Tennessee, but New York based, with some really high quality, experienced guys, including Fred Joseph, who ran Drexel Burnham back in the day when Milken was there. And that was my intro to finance. And honestly, like, I was interviewing for jobs, Khe, and I didn't know what the difference between the red and the black and the green were. Like, it was just kind of guessing when people were asking me these questions, but I saw it as a place where I could get a lot of experience and learn and work hard. And so you learn kind of the 80 hours, 100-hour weeks is kind of a new normal, which is not, by the way. And I came out of that, but I got to my second year. And so in the banking land, as many folks know, if you're as an analyst, you get asked to stay on for a third year or you don't. And so that's a big turning point. And if 6 months before, I wouldn't have been asked, but I had this wonderful mentor who happened to join the firm at the right time, getting through, and he guided me. And so I have my second year review, and they said, "Hey, we want to give you a third year offer." And I said, "Great. Well, I don't want to do it." They're like, "What? Nobody says that." And I said, "No." I was like, I will help you transition someone in. And this is probably one of the moments where I actually listened to a deeper voice inside of me of what I actually wanted to do, not versus what I thought I should do. And I wanted to go into international affairs. And I was watching Alias at the time, by the way, Jennifer Gardner. And I was watching the Foreign identity, these things. I'm going to be CIA. And if you see me, I'm almost 6'7". It would be like Chevy Chase and Spies Like Us. If you saw this whole movie, it's like, this guy is not inconspicuous. He does not blend in at all. But I wanted to, so did not go into the intelligence world, but I did end up working at the U.S. Department of State and working this really cool job in D.C. for 3 years. Probably, honestly, one of the coolest jobs, if not the coolest job I'll ever have. And I went
State Department?
In the State Department. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I was in this office. I eventually got into this office called the Policy Planning Staff, which is the Secretary of State. It was Condoleezza Rice at the time. It's her 15-person independent policy office, where it was 2004 through 2007. So shit was crazy in the world, to put it very technically and non-foreign policy terms. But it was fascinating. And I was surrounded by these incredibly smart people who were just incredibly well-versed in our variety of different across the globe. And I remember sitting in our staff meeting, this awesome, he was actually a professor at Stanford. He and Condoleezza Rice, she was the provost, and he ran the international affairs program at Stanford. A guy named Steve Craster, who's just an awesome boss. But we'd go around the room and he'd go have his meeting with Condi, and he'd come back and we'd go around the room, and it'd be the world in 1 hour with some highly classified stuff. And it was just fascinating. I was just this 27-year-old kid, like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. But I got to do that. And then I was a political appointee at the time, which is a role that it turns over with, you get appointed by the quote unquote by the president, but I was a peon. The president knew actually who I was. It was George W. Bush at the time, but I had this job, and it was going to end in 2008. And so, anyways, everyone in DC has 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 degrees. And I felt very inferior. And so I said, well, I don't want to go to law school. Actually got rejected to every law school I applied to coming out of Carolina, even though I said I didn't want to go into law. So I ended up going into, or applying for business schools. Cause I said, wow, this will be great. And I got into Wharton, and I was super excited to go. So that really led me to private equity, where once I got there, it was the thing to do. It was at that point in time, 2007, I went to school, graduated 2009. By the way, that was the Great Recession. Not a good time to come out. So
you graduated business school in the Great Recession, and you graduated college around the dot-com crash?
Yeah.
Because we're around the same age.
Don't follow me to any schools, by the way. So, or you, Khe, for that matter.
Well, I didn't go to business school, so
same time. Yeah, same time frame.
Got it. So you start private equity in 2009.
Yep.
And then that incident happens in
2016. Yeah.
2016.
Sorry, 2019. 2019. Yeah.
So 10 years.
10 years.
Of private equity.
Yeah.
And if you look back on that, I mean, obviously I'm sure you worked we worked your butt off. You probably took a lot of red eyes and all that. But you also said that it was an abnormal. The doctors just said like, this is a freak accident. Do you attribute any of that to how you had chosen to live your life, like previously? Like, did you not sleep enough? Did you do mountains of cocaine? Did you?
Yeah. So I'm doing a lot of cocaine right now as we talk, just to kind of keep this energy. No, I'm such a square that I think I've tried cocaine once in my life. But the answer is yes. There is how I lived my life and how I approached my life did contribute to what happened. And I didn't really want to recognize this or come to grips with this, Khe, for a long time, or at least right afterwards. But, you know, I mean, life has a funny way of working, right? And there's the medical, the Western side of, you know, so all the doctors that I mentioned, no one really knows. I started to go in the middle of pandemic. I grew up Catholic, so I'm, again, pretty square in religion too. Like it's, you know, it's like, hey, you know, you do that. It's pretty rigid. It's like, this is how it is. This is what you do, and you do this. If you do it, you go to heaven. If you don't do it, then you don't go to heaven.
You're an all-American athlete, like all-American 6'6", 200-pound football player. Now you're 200 pounds. Catholic from Nashville who worked, you know, for GW for W, like. You're down the middle.
I fit the bill, right? I'm like a caricature of it all. And a lot of that stuff is what I thought I should be doing. We'll get into a little bit of this, but you know, I lived this life, and it was a lot of fun in some ways, but it wasn't, if I look back on it now, was it really my own life? I mean, it was, because I was doing it, but I was doing all the things that I thought I should do. If that makes sense. Yeah. And some of them I really love. I love playing football. I was cheering for Notre Dame, of course, last night in the game with my buddy who's a big Ohio State fan. So it was fun back and forth. But I was going about it in a way that if I do these things, if I'm successful, if I do this, if I get this gold star on this one and have this on my resume, people will accept me. Because at the end of the day, all I want to do is belong. Most of us want to do is belong and be accepted. And I was so scared to fail. I was so scared to be rejected. I was so scared to be alone. And those fears still present. But I found my path, if you will, to acceptance. At least I thought I did, in this achieving, in this world of doing things where people would be like, holy shit, this guy's killing it. When actually it was killing me in retrospect. But that's how I approached it. And I didn't really realize it. I didn't really realize what it was doing to me, and kind of spiritually as well, so in the middle of the pandemic, my wife and I went to Santa Fe. We live in Austin, and we were looking for places to escape to. You could work, and a good friend of ours kindly gave us their place to spend some time in. And so we spent two months or so in Santa Fe, which is an incredible place on a lot of levels. But we met a couple of mystics. They wouldn't call themselves this, but in Santa Fe. And one of them is a voice alchemist. And you asked kind of what happened and like what kind of reinforced. So imagine the scene where it's the middle of the day. I'm on Zoom, by the way, because it was pandemic and people were still early. It was a year after I went down in cardiac arrest. And she's like, okay, I'm gonna chant and play some music and light a candle, and I'm gonna work through your chakras. I didn't know what a chakra was really, but I'm sitting there laying down, and there's a candle lit, and she starts going through and singing and like these foreign tongues I didn't recognize. These drums are beating in the background. And I went to this other place. Okay, I actually went, and just visions. There was this pillar of fire exploding like up through the sky, through outer space. And we get done. It felt like 5 minutes. It was an hour. And we started to talk about it. And there were a few things that really stood out in this thing, because she explained, I didn't tell her, by the way, that I had been in cardiac arrest, but she says, I saw your heart when I got to your heart chakra. I saw your heart, and I saw a broken heart that had been shattered in the past life, but it's starting to heal. I was like, wow, okay. Huh. And then she said, I also saw that spiral of fire that you mentioned. And she goes, I saw it as the fire that's within you catching wild and trying to leave this earth. But there was some really tenuous, very weak, but enough of a connection to keep you here. And I said, that makes more sense than anything I've heard in the last year and anything I've really heard since. And so that fire it's very real within me. And so that's the way. Yeah. I mean, it takes a second. And, you know, for this guy who had just kind of started down
psychedelics or anything, right? Dude, I'm
just laying in bed on Zoom.
Right? Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's wild. Like, this is wild. And I was so intrigued. And so it kind of kicked off a journey that I'm on now and why I'm here, just to be like, what happened and why. And just, I'd always kind of done this. It was a very certain way that I live. This is what you do. This is how you do it. This is what you do. Private equity, football, name your usual thing, become a doctor, become a lawyer, like pick your traditional, like, you know what you're going to do. It's very certain. You know how to do it. And if you work hard and you got smarts, and by the way, if you have a ton of help, and which no one ever talks about, and circumstances and people, you can know how to get there. But this was the unknown. And so it was kind of the Western versus Eastern. So that really kicked off a pretty big, I'll call it spiritual with a lowercase s journey that's been a lot of fun.
Oh man. Okay. So I have so many places to go. One, I just want to make one observation where.
Sure, please.
We were talking about earlier on the last podcast we were on together where we met. Shout out Mike Cordaro. That it's funny how we, like, two people with very just like almost opposite backgrounds can kind of have that same craving and yearning and emptiness. And so, like, you're like 6'6", 200, like I went to college, I was 5'10", 135, right? And like, there was nothing, I grew up with second generation immigrants. I'm second generation. Like, I wish that there was a football team. I wish that I was over 6 feet. I wish that I could hang out with football players and, date the women that football players dated and go to the parties that football players would go to. And, but it's funny, it's like, if I think of myself at, mid 30s, successful in Wall Street terms, it's like we wanted the same things. Again, you verbalized it so succinctly. I suspect that you couldn't have verbalized it that succinctly when you were 35 or 37. It's just with the benefit of hindsight. I know I couldn't, but I could say the same thing, right? Like, I wanted to feel love. I wanted to feel seen. I wanted to feel validated. I wanted to feel relevant. I wanted to know that I'd never be alone. And like, how was I going to do that? I was like, accumulate as much money, status via achievement as possible. And then all those other things would fall into place. And so I'm curious that, I have this phrase that I've said on the podcast before, but it's basically the pebble in the shoe, where it's like, something's off.
Yeah.
But you're not exactly, like, it's not clear what is off. It's just this like feeling. Did you have in those kind of like peak PE, pre-accident, pre-cardiac arrest days, did you have some inkling, pebble, that something's off here?
Yes. Yeah, a resounding yes. Did I pay attention to it? No. I even had a physical. Like, I was in what's called atrial fibrillation, which is AFib, commonly known, which is a non-fatal arrhythmia for most people. About 10% of the population has it. It's just where your heart's, like, the little chambers are going crazy. I had that for, I don't know how long. It may have been like 6-7 years. But I just thought I was tired and I just need to work through it. And so I had a physical.
You were diagnosed with it? Like,
that after
you had it.
I went into cardiac arrest, because I came back and I said, hey guys, I'm still feeling like my heart's kind of jumping around. They said, you know what AFib is? I said, I do not. I said, you have it. I said, okay. Well, that thank you for telling me that now. And I'd even seen cardiologists, but you have to be in it to be diagnosed at the time when you go see a doctor. But listen, I should have. So there was a physical reminder, right? There was a physical pebble in my heart that was shaking and saying, "Hey, like, please, like."
And you went from like fatigue and low, like things like your
you
body
just
was
like
giving
it feels
you
like
signs.
your heart's jumping from like 60 to 140 and back, and so it feels like your heart's in your throat. And you can get out of it a few different ways. The least healthy way is to just start working out, which is what I did whenever that happened. Sleep is another alternative, or cold water, or your vagus nerve. But I went for like how do you hit yourself with a baseball bat as many times as you can approach. And so, yes, but also even more than that, emotionally, like I wanted to leave. I thought about leaving multiple times. Like there was a moment in my career where they gave me some options, and one is like, "You're not very good at this job." I was like, "I'm going to show you." And fortunately, a couple of the senior guys gave me a shot to do what I do well, which is the interpersonal side versus the quant side, which is really where I excelled. But I would just, if you really look at it, it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot. So, I mean, I truly believe all things happen for a reason, even going into cardiac arrest and, all those heartbreaks and sorrows that we go through. But there were a lot of pebbles in the shoe. And I fast forward a little bit too. So almost 2 years to the day that I went into cardiac arrest, I was fired. Almost 12 years into this job. So that, we can get into the emotional roller coaster that was. But
so you recover, you climb the mountain, and you're like, I'm not skipping a beat. The drive that you have to be the man, to be the, seen a certain way, just keeps going. And then you get fired 2.5 years later.
So you get fired. That was that was the ego. That was the ego kill right there.
And it's funny because you alluded, you're like, "Oh, they told me I wasn't that good at this part of the job." So this wasn't like we're like offering you this like path out that's just like, you're not good at this job.
No, it's like you're out, and we got to figure out an exit plan. And without getting into all the details of it, but I was so, interestingly, when I heard the words, it felt like the weight of the world came off my shoulders. I was just incredible relief, just like, oh gosh. But I couldn't show it. And I was like, no, I got to be cool, stone cold. And right when I got off the phone, it was probably minutes later, it was like the 5 stages of grief. It was a denial, anger. I was pissed. I couldn't believe it. I was bargaining it. So it was this weird. So it ended up being this long transition out, 7 months, where I had to kind of deal with all this stuff and
while still being in the seat,
still being in it. So we kind of in limbo, right? But I was working, but I wasn't, but I didn't have a job, but I couldn't tell anyone. I wasn't in that, it was this weird uncertainty, which I had not lived in very well, but it was during that time. And I had wanted to go, but I would never go. I'd probably still be in this job, which is totally fine. There were a lot of wonderful things, wonderful friends in my old firm, and they gave the financial runway to do this and have this conversation. So I'm very grateful in a lot of ways, and I learned incredible just to operate and see what the world is like when you're operating at that sort of level, because it's an incredibly successful firm and on a rocket ship, really. When I was there, but I also I looked at it. I've been thinking about it a lot, obviously, over the last couple of years, and what was missing is this ability to really impact people positively, individually or on a large scale. Like that's not the game that private equity is set up for. It could be in certain, maybe
you're
it's
not
out there.
The like we're supporting the pensions of firefighters.
There is. So, this is like life is so complex and such a paradox.
The asset class has done well for the firefighters of
look at it like yes, and how else? Like the goal and the incentives are all set up, just like a lot of games. You watched the football game last night. The incentive is to win the game. Everything else around that, you could do a bunch of different things that are beneficial to more people and do it in how you go about it is important. What you're actually doing is important. But instead of the private equity game is made to make money. For me as a as a professional, and then for the investors, which are, there are pension funds, also sovereign wealth funds and a variety of other people. But it wasn't, I was missing this like day-to-day ability to like, I just, how do I just always like, there was something there and I kind of hit it, or to at least connect with people. And and that there was a part of my job that I loved was connecting with people. I spent a lot of time sourcing deals, but bring all this full circle here is that I wanted to leave this job.
Yeah.
Like, but I was too scared because what would people think? Who am I without this job? What am I going to do next? There was so much uncertainty and I was real coward about it. And so it took someone actually firing me, which I was angry about for 6 months. Until right before I leave, there was a variety of things that happened that kind of created something really broke open inside of me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm still angry. And thank you. Thank you for this. Thank you for this chance to do something that I would never have done before. Unless you gave it to me. And so in many ways, this is, it gave me the chance. And then the most important thing that I did is, and what I never did before is I stopped.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. I'm going to pause you there.
Yeah, sure.
Wow. So one thing I just want to point back, it's interesting. Like, you almost died, but the thing that got you to quit your job was getting fired, not almost dying.
100%.
Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, you could be very clear about it. Yeah. So I was like, I'm not this courageous soul that left the world, had died on a gym floor, then got up and said, I'm going to change myself and the world. No, I had to get my hand shattered, then I had to get fired, and then I had to go through this weird limbo before I finally, and then take a sabbatical, and then have a kid before I finally said, wow, man, maybe there's something different that
Can
you
I
could
tell
do.
you that, sorry, I just cut you off on that. There. There is, so I work with a lot of people in the coaching side that are in some phase of what you just described, minus the cardiac arrest part.
Yeah,
or
don't
even
encourage that.
Even the cardiac arrest part, but I cannot tell you how many 45-year-old, they're usually men, senior executives at banks and hedge funds and private equity funds, and they're like, Khe, I just wish I got fired. They're like, they basically say behind closed doors what you have said privately. There's no other way I could walk away from this unless I wish I got fired. But the problem is, oftentimes they're never going to get fired. I even know someone who had a significant health scare, and he's like, the health scare gave me cover for my next thing, right? And so you're completely acting in the norm of, our very distorted peer group, but nonetheless our peer group. But what was the hardest emotion to deal with, in that grieving period, the anger, the 5 stages? What was the thing that that kind of ate you up inside?
The thing that, I'll answer that 2 ways. The thing that ate me up inside was probably some mix of anger and fear there, because I was just scared. I mean, below it all, I was just really scared of what was next. And so just being with that and being okay with that fear and saying, where is that coming from? Why is that coming? There was a teacher used the term, the acronym FEAR is false evidence appearing real. I can never leave really this job. This will happen. This will happen. This will happen. Will it?
Yeah.
Most of the time, 99% of the time, it's not true. But probably the thing that was the hardest, and it's not emotion, but it's a motion or lack of motion, was stopping, actually stopping doing things and creating space. I don't mean I just sat in a chair still for months and months and months and meditated. I can't do that. I try to meditate daily, but not for hours and hours and hours, but just not moving forward, not having a goal, not trying to achieve, not trying to go work out, not trying to get the next thing, just taking a step back and creating the space to ask these questions, which the folks that you reference and myself never ask, which is, who am I? Why do I do these things? And what's the impact that it causes on me and my life?
Yeah. Can I ask how much of the fear, because a lot of our listeners that are in similar boats, again, sans cardiac arrest, there's a financial fear that's like either my life has gotten really expensive, or, you know, I grew up with a lot of times like kids like who grew up with very little money. They're like, I'm so scared of going back to like the parents that the life that my parents had escaped. Could you pinpoint the fears with, was there a financial fear component in the fear?
Yeah. So for me, there was a financial, I didn't grow up. We grew up kind of upper middle class, somewhere in between there. It's kind of
what do those words mean today?
Yeah.
Anyway?
I got to go to private school. Like I never wanted for anything. Yeah. I'll put it that way. Like we didn't go travel the world as kids. Yeah. Like we got to go to Europe, which was game changing. We actually went on a pilgrimage, and because my little sister was born and almost died at birth, to Medjugorje, which was Yugoslavia at the time, now Croatia or Bosnia. But I didn't grow up in this kind of incredibly affluent. We had money though, so I never wanted. I think my parents probably hid it a little more, any sort of financial struggle than I was able to see. Yeah. But I never had a chance where, you know, could I get new shoes for basketball season?
Yeah.
Yes.
You weren't vacationing at the Four Seasons.
No, we weren't vacationing. We were Embassy Suites was awesome. Yeah. But I mean, it's also it's funny. Like I find this in myself and others that we sometimes, at least I try to make myself out to be less, you know, more poor than I was, like the rags to riches American dream stories. Yeah. A lot greater if you really if you got to paint the picture in this really extreme version. But so no, that fear wasn't. There was some of that, but you know, once you kind of do the math on it, at least where I was, and listen, I have to work.
Yeah.
Again, but we have runway. Yep. We have years of runway, and we've kind of cut down on certain things. But we also, you know, we turn the dimmer switch on, and you and I talked about this with Mike, as you know, the reckless approach of, you know, throwing in, you know, fuck all to the wind and just quitting and doing this is, I mean, maybe some people do that. I couldn't do that, but the big fear for me was more on the identity side and just the image side of what will people think, and really the uncertainty. It's like, okay, if I'm not doing this thing that I've been doing for so long, like, it's kind of like if you're in this relationship that's unhealthy for you, in part because of the way that you approach that relationship, the toxic relationship. Like I was contributing to it. Like I didn't die because I was working at this job. I died because I was living the way that I lived, and I was in an environment where I could push myself in this sort of mode. But it was, I had a chance to, I had to stop in order to do that.
Did you attempt to heal that, or how did you work through that identity struggle? Because I often tell people, it's like you quit, and this is usually people that quit on their own volition. They're like, I say is the honeymoon period. Yeah, like, I can't believe I can work out at, you know, noon on a Tuesday.
I go to a movie during the day.
I haven't read the Wall Street Journal in a week. And then after that period, there's like too much space. And then I call it the wilderness, where it's like, what am I going to do next? Who am I? How do people see me? How do I see myself? Financial insecurity kind of kicks in the wilderness if you're wired that way. How did you navigate, or how are you navigating the wilderness?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you framing it that way, because I still am navigating the wilderness. And in some ways, I will always be navigating the wilderness.
10 years navigating.
That's
navigating.
But that's, I mean, if you follow any sort of spiritual text, historically, there is a wilderness. Like in the Hindu tradition, it's called the forest dweller, which is about our age. You go from right, as householder to forest dweller, and then you come back as this elder. Once you actually had a chance
forest
to.
dweller end?
Well, it really depends. It's the stage in
You
life,
gotta like
the
adjust
season.
for life, adjust for lifespan.
Yeah, and the whole, and I'm not steeped in the Hindu tradition, but I have a lot of respect from what little I know. But the idea is you go out and like you've been doing, you got to go do. This is part of life, but this is why you talk about how many 45-year-old people, especially men, that are quite lost and don't do much introspection, especially threes in Enneagram land or achievers or performers. At some point, you have to go out away from the doing and actually process and do some introspection. And that introspection is an inward journey, but it's also a journey with a conversation with the world. Yeah. I used to view the world as a competition, right? Everything was a competition with myself primarily, but also with other people. Like, Kay's got X followers, where I should have X followers. Like, I don't even have a social media account right now, but so it's kind of like in some ways, I've kind of swung the other way. Probably the pendulum will swing back, but I kind of had to do that to get out of this mode of doing. And then and I had to just create the space. And for me, the most important thing, and I can get into some of the things that I do or learn or people that I've listened to, but the most important thing was creating space. Yeah. Right. I mean, that's if there's one message that anyone says, how do I not die on a gym floor? It's create space to understand why you're doing the things that you're doing. Create a little bit of space each day. You can meditate, you can walk, you can spend time having a beautiful conversation with someone. You can sit with your child, you can sit with you can just sit and watch a sunrise or sunset. Like, you could do things that are super woo-woo. You go to a psychedelic journey. You can also go work out. You can also just have a great cup of coffee. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. Take a nice bath. I mean, something that you're able to create some space. Then they become habits, right? I just never did that. I had a lot of great habits, but I would meditate while I was in the sauna, while I was warming up for my workout, while I was doing 5 things at once, right? In order to just maximize my productivity. And then it really becomes a disease. There's this wonderful book written by a Korean German author called The Burnout Society. Yeah. You know the book. I mean, it was like the contemplative life versus the active life. And like, we just it's harder to find that. And so, but I had to make the decision. The one thing I did do, so I did get fired. That was not my decision, but I did make the decision to not go back into finance immediately. And finance isn't bad unto itself. Like, if someone goes into finances doing it and they've asked the question, they understand the impact that's on them and their family and whoever they impact in their business, the other companies, the people, great, go do it. Just be aware of what you're doing or whatever it is. If you're hosting a podcast, awesome. Like, you can also swing the other way, right? We talked about this. Like, you could become you could seek your identity in the fame of the internet world. Or become and it's so I had to stop and create some space. And again, it's not, the stopping isn't always it's fun to do because you can't, in some ways I had to get lost. I had to get lost from what I had known. I had to let go of this. I've been a coward, okay, like in a lot of ways. Like, I could do the hard stuff, physically sacrificing, you named it, like play football, climb the mountain, go through investment banking, go through private equity, like do the job, work at the, whatever it is. Tell me to go run a marathon, I'll go do it. Like, I will outwork, out hustle, like I will do it, right? Chip on the shoulder. But when it came to facing the hard questions in life, like, we could talk about my whole struggle with commitment and doing years and years of therapy to actually get to a point where I finally saw my relationship with my wife and the ability to commit as a beautiful new beginning, not the end of all my independence. Right. I mean, that was just there's a great, if you're a fan of Rainer Maria Rilke, the great Austrian poet, there's this wonderful living the questions. Like, and he talks about how we don't look for the answers right now, ask the questions and live into the questions. And someday you will live into the answers. Just ask the questions. And I butchered what is an incredibly beautiful text in his letters to a young poet, but that's like what I had to do. Like, and then all of a sudden, like, it feels like all of a sudden, but it's kind of like the pebble in your shoe. But I think of it more as seeds sprouting in winter, because underneath the soil, when trees are hibernating and they lose their leaves, they're not dead underneath, right? They're protecting, they're preserving energy. And underneath, there's a lot of growth happening. There's a lot of nourishing. There's a lot of roots are getting deeper and deeper and deeper. So when springtime comes, and that's kind of, and nature is a great teacher. And I'm just realizing that for, 40 plus years of living that, so I had to go do that. And I in some ways I hesitate to give the specific advice to say, go do these 5 things or do this or follow this.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that though, because the next question I was gonna ask is, you seem to kind of, and it's like kind of in line with your Enneagram 3. It's like, okay, I'm gonna deepen my introspection. I'm gonna read these, gotta read these texts. I'm gonna see these teachers. I'm gonna start these practices. And without making, I'm really with you, as like, there's no recommendations here, but I love like when people like share their kind of spiritual, I hate this language, we're just gonna say it anyway, like toolkit. And I'll share it, like with me, it's like my 10 years of meditation, a lot of therapy, recently internal family systems. I read a decent amount of like non-dual texts. I listen to a ton of Dharma talks, little bit of psychedelics here and there, not like an anchor of the portfolio. That's kind of like, those are the they've been evolving, but you've alluded to some of them. But I'd love if you could like, share the ones that are, just share your portfolio. Show me mine, I'll show you yours.
I'm happy to. I mean, you call them habits, practices, and it's kind of like anything else, right? I'm a jock, and so I speak in jock terms. Like you get the fundamentals down, and you just figure out what you've got to do on a regular basis. There's the physical side, then there's the emotional and spiritual side. But the key that I keep doing is I just keep trying things on, which, by the way, I didn't do, even if I may fail, which was so unheard of for me. Like I needed to have it all figured out, and I still do in this new role as I'm kind of working through this. But there's a few things that I one is I crave deeper connections with people. And so how that comes out, and that includes myself. I just learned, I'll give you practice, the specific one. So this is someone who's incredibly overdeveloped in some ways socially, big family, other things, which is wonderful. I can go interact in most crowds, although I have more social anxiety than I will lead on. I started to experience emotions internally without immediately texting my family or sharing it with my wife. And this is something that came through couples therapy. So we do couples therapy. I went through my own kind of psychotherapy, kind of behavior therapy for seven or so years. I may go back, but we just got to a point where it was kind of a graduation at this point in my life. I used to really want to feel like if I had this great podcast with Khe, I would run home and tell my wife and be like, blah, 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 Khe asked these great questions. We had so much fun. And I share this and blah, 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 blah. And it's just like Cyclops from the X-Men. It's just like, poof, just like knocking her over. She's very protective of her energy. She's my greatest teacher, honestly. Like, you want to go do something, go listen to your wife.
My wife's similar. She's just like, she's like, keep it to yourself.
Yeah. And it's like, and in some ways she's teaching me that, but so after we have this podcast, I'm probably going to sit for a few minutes. I'm not going to sit for hours, but I'm going to sit for a few minutes and just enjoy what just happened. I'm not going to text my family on our group chat, which is always flying around. I'm not going to go knock down my wife with my energy. I'm not going to write a long thank you note to you immediately. Like I may do that at some point. I will. I'd like to, because it's fun. But I like just think of it as like experiencing like feelings of joy, and then also of sorrow and suffering or anger or whatever it is. Like yesterday, I sat and celebrated Martin Luther King and watched the inauguration. Like, talk about a paradox, right? And so, but can you be in both those moments? But what I do in order to get that way, is to your original question, is there's kind of three or four things I do every day. I have to move. Like, I don't have to. I like to move. it doesn't have to be a high intensity workout, but
Yeah.
I do some movement every day, most every day. Sundays, no, it's a day of rest. It's fun. I lay in bed. My wife teaches me to actually relax in the morning versus getting up and trying to go do 100 things. And I will do that. I'll move most days. I'll spend 30 to 40 minutes. I'll do some sort of mindfulness practice, which are also more kind of a little bit of a dealer's choice and whatever I'm feeling. Some days it's it's unguided. Some days it's guided. Some days it's some really specific, some rain with tarp rock for, compassion, or I'm actually doing her and Jack Kornfield's 40-day mindfulness daily course, which I've done for the past 3 years. And it's amazing. It's so simple, but they're so good.
I love what they do too. Yeah.
Yeah. They're just incredible, but I will do it as a beginner, even though I've been kind of practicing, so to speak. But, mindfulness isn't for everybody, but for me, it works and helps me kind of calm things down. And then I'll journal. So I'll do a little bit of like 20 minutes ish, and I'll journal for 10, 15 minutes. And I mentioned this on our other podcast. I'll mention it again. And this is where like self-compassion is so important to me. I start every journal. I started this 5-6 years ago, probably. Soon after I actually went into cardiac arrest. I can't remember when I started journaling. It's an interesting question. Actually, it was Jerry Colonna. I listened to him talk about journaling, but I kind of adapted to my own. But I say, "Good morning, beautiful self." And at the end of it, and then I say, "Right now, I'm feeling," and just write whatever comes up. And then at the end of it, I usually write about a page in a little kind of smaller notebook. And I say, "I love you. Have a beautiful day." And it feels like very emotional and cathartic to say it. It also feels unworthy. It feels like I shouldn't say that. That's weak. It feels all these things, but I do it every day and most days. And if I don't do it, then you don't do it. Like that's the other part of all this. Those are the big things. And then I sleep at night. It's like if I don't sleep, I don't have a sleep pod or anything of that nature. But like I'm very, and we have a almost 2-year-old. So there's moments where you just kind of got to make the sacrifice, but it just slows me down. Okay. And I just have recently, I'll read, I listen to David White. I love David White. His stuff is really powerful, and just very introspective, but some days I'm not ready. I don't want to listen to David White. And so I'll watch a football game like it. So there's a lot of this, there's a lot of these things that are kind of, but those are that movement, mindfulness, and journaling with almost forced introspection, like me being introspective and writing and ready to talk about all of what we're talking about my cardiac arrest. And it's really hard. It's very draining, but I make time to do it. And I also make time when I'm just at that point and I need to stop. And I'm just saying it's not going anywhere. Then I'm able to get up. There's one teacher he said, whatever it is that you're doing in these practices, get 30% uncomfortable, not 80, not anxiety inducing, like, oh my gosh, like I can't sit here any longer. My leg is about to fall off or, whatever. I'm breaking. I'm migraine from meditating so much, but just get like 30% uncomfortable. Live in the edges a little bit.
Yeah. Wow. Beautiful. Last question. And it's probably not a fair question to end on, but I know many of the people are wondering, they're like, so what are you going to do next? How do you think of that? I think there are probably people that want to know, like, how are you going to make money next? But I'm more curious of like, you seem to be kind of in the wilderness phase, learning, connecting with yourself, developing a series of healthy practices. How do you see, or do you see like a next activity emerging as kind of the thing that, you dedicate yourself to, or you dedicate considerable amount of time to?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm figuring it out in a lot of ways. And there was this wonderful book someone recommended when I was leaving my old firm, and it's called Transitions by William Bridges. And it's an awesome book. I highly recommend it for anybody. And it's very introspective, thought-provoking book about how you go through life transitions. And he talks about there's always an ending there's a middle zone, this neutral zone, this kind of winter, and then there's a new beginning. Most of the time, we don't go through all three of these when there's big life transitions, job, relationships, near death, whatever it may be.
Sorry, say that again. There's an ending.
There's always an ending. There's a neutral zone, there's an ending, and there's a new beginning. But the part that we often forget about is this in between. Where we have to go sit in the forest, or we have winter. I mean, look at the seasons, right? We're in winter in the northern hemisphere, and everything's resting, right? It's kind of, the equinox was around the holidays, 21st of December. And so we're in this time so I had to go do that. So I'm kind of in, and they're not fully linear, right? I'm still always ending this last job. And I came up with this funny word saying it's about integrating, like ending, but integrating really. Cause it's always a part of me. The years I spent at my old firm and whatever I do next, and it's great. It's part of me, just like my old relationships are part of me, just like my childhood is a part of me. Like it's all a part of me. But I'm kind of at this phase right now, Khe, where I'm in this new beginning and I'm kind of experimenting. And I take Adam Grant as a big, the thought leader, but also pushes this idea of trying on, just experimenting. Yep. And so I'm in this experimenting phase, but the two areas, if I had to look in a crystal ball and say, what am I going to do? One is I want to share this story. Which is very scary to me for all the reasons we talked about, the fear of someone being like, oh, who is this guy? Is he just this privileged white guy who made some money and blah, blah, blah. And a lot of people will think that. And that's okay, because I do have those qualities. And I have this crazy fucking story that, that finally made me also stop and do something that, a lot of people don't do. So I want to share this story and do this work. I want to bring people together and create more connection. Sharing the story as to how can I light the fire of vitality
Beautiful.
in people's lives. I bought a URL, thevitalityproject.com.
Nice.
So this is you and I've talked about, and there's Joseph Campbell said, vital people vitalize. If you're a fan of his work. And that's like what I think about vitality. Like, how do I inspire that, enable that, encourage that? So you, Lou, and if there's a little artwork behind me my wife gave me years ago, that's Journey. It's a cassette tape, and I love Journey, Don't Stop Believing. And I've sang it at more family weddings than I care to admit to. And I don't have a great voice, by the way. But it's about like, how can somebody go on their journey? And, and that means whatever that journey is, it's going to be different, but how to inspire that kind of vitality to live life, like to get off the treadmill, to stop sleepwalking, right? You can use these metaphors, or really sleep sprinting in most of our cases that are probably your listeners. And so there's this, how do I do that? And part of that is really just creating opportunities to connect with ourselves, each other, and the world around us. And you can get real woo-woo talking about the universe, but like, how do we really connect? How do we do that? So the talk, I bring people together once a month to do this, just small group that's kind of organically happened. And that's the point. So there's that path. And then there is something there, which I've just started exploring, because it keeps bubbling up inside of me. You talked about the rocks. I think of more of the seeds. Like, it's like, hey, Lou, this thing, what are you curious about? Where's your curiosity, right? All your bliss, your curiosity is the way I think about it. And it's about this idea of like conscious capitalism stake. Like, how do we do business in a way that Patagonia did business or does business, right? A great business, incredible business, great products, great run well, but also positively impacting the world and doing it fully aware and mission driven. And there's a few other ones that are like this, these companies, and maybe there's an investing. So I want to dive into that more, and kind of, with all that I've learned and seen, and fun to do with some old colleagues too, or totally new people. And I keep meeting people all of a sudden that are in the impact investing or not, and they're in totally different worlds, but they're very curious about it. And so there's something there that I want to go try on and kind of put some energy and time behind. So those are the two things, and maybe they meld, and so we'll see. Like, it's in some ways it's really fun to, and I think the money part will come. Honestly, it sounds maybe sounds Pollyannish, but unfortunately we still have, some equity coming from our old firm, which is wonderful, which I'm very grateful for. But it is something I do think about. But in some ways kind of doing what I'm really feel like is like, I'm being like driven or called to do, and there's something externally, including introductions to you and other people that are saying, wow, like, take the next step. Right.
Yeah.
And so keep going, even though you can't see the finish line. There's this great quote from the book, The Lion's Tracker's Guide to Life. It's kind of gotten pretty in vogue recently, but it's a really wonderful book. And he's in the tracker, the guy who's like the mentor, the indigenous tracker in South Africa, says, I don't know where I'm going, but I know exactly how to get there. I'm like,
I love that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go. But in order to do that, you kind of have to let go of all the gripping and over exerting and trying and blah, blah, blah. But you do have to try, you do have to go. It's, so yeah, that's a long answer too. I don't know.
No,
I think I know where I'm going.
I think it's beautiful because I think there is an intention, right? And there is a confidence, but not an arrogance. There's like a confidence, but a humility also.
Yeah.
And then there's a surrender. I think that's why you needed to get fired, right? It's like the surrender doesn't always happen by itself, right? Like
right.
Surrender. Surrender is a hard thing. And, 10 years in, I'm still learning to surrender to it. So,
yeah.
But Lou, man, you have such like the level of self-awareness is like ridiculously inspiring, and then the warmth and everything that you say, and then the precision, like again, that like confident humility that you have about what this next chapter looks like is just, I know that for myself and our listeners, it's something that they're really going to value and resonate with, and it will be very well received. So you're doing your thing, man. You're making an impact. So I thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. I'm learning to take compliments. So thank you for saying that. And thank you for what you do. And thank you for the conversation today. And just, you've created something that is pretty incredible. And so I give you flowers, as the kids say these days, as well. And so keep it up. It's a lot of fun. Also, it's just fun to chat. So thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. And as someone that is also learning how to take compliments, I'm going to sit with what you said and take it in. So thank you for that. And tell us where can our listeners go find out more about you, connect with you? We'll put anything in the show notes.
Yeah, great question. I'm still figuring that part out too. I guess you can look on LinkedIn. You'll find me there. But
we'll
maybe
find you on LinkedIn. That's a good.
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. In a year, I'd like to create some sort of place to some more resources for folks. And so TB, more to come. But if you really want to reach out, find me on LinkedIn or reach out to Khe, and we'll figure it out. So
love it, man.
But thank you. Thanks again for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Lou.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.